We're now recording this Chaos Common Working Group meeting on March 19, 2020. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Cool. All right. I I don't have much on the agenda for this one, to be honest. So, because I think if I remember correctly, in the last meeting, we made a ton of progress on one of the metrics and basically put it out for the part of the rolling release, which was fantastic. So we made loads of progress, but I feel like in the last meeting we kind of wrapped a bunch of stuff up. So I think that we probably need to use at least some of this meeting to regroup and figure out what to work on next. Does anybody else have anything that they want to add to the agenda? Or any other thoughts on what we should be doing?
I missed the last meeting, so if you released a metric, I think figuring what to work on next makes a lot of sense.
How about you, Garrick? Anything to add?
I was just thinking about looking at the comments that we already collected on the metric that we currently have out for review.
It's a good idea.
I'll add this. I was just looking for the link.
Hey, John. We're just putting together the agenda for today.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
If you want to add yourself to the list of attendees, I just dropped the minutes in the.
Perfect. I was just hunting through that, so thank you for helping me out there.
Yeah, no worries.
Hopefully y'all are hanging in there pretty well.
Yes. The I don't know, like I work from home a lot anyway, so there's not other than the children being upstairs, but when I remodeled the basement, I soundproofed the ceiling.
Look at you thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
So smart.
I knew they'd be 13 one day, and it's actually working out pretty well.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, I work from home all the time, so that part isn't that different for me. What's different is that my partner is now also working from home full time at the same time in our little tiny flat in the UK.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, my partner's always worked from home, so it's not been a big deal, but yeah, that can be tricky.
It would be easier if we had more space. Like the last house I lived in the US, I had 2 extra rooms so we could have 2 offices. But here we have one office. So we just have to, we're literally sitting down at the beginning of every morning and comparing calendars and deciding who gets the office when. Because the office is the place with where you can plug into the directly into the Ethernet cables. So it's the place with the better performance. So like for video calls, it makes a really noticeable difference.
I bet.
But the mecca of life at your house there. This is where you all move to. That's funny.
Totally.
No, I'm working from home.
I was gonna say it's not too bad because he actually doesn't have that many meetings, and most of his meetings aren't video calls. So, so it makes it a little bit easier.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd be getting like a 50-foot Ethernet cable and running it through the hallway.
I have some of those in case it gets to that. It might be something I'm working on in my house during this downtime here, because I noticed my Wi-Fi is well. Actually, I have a line here, but I don't think it's the greatest. So I need to do some work on upgrading it, and I got nothing but time now. So
yeah, well, my partner works in tech too, so we got loads of cables laying around. We could run one from the router in the living room and just like run it across the across the middle of the living room if we really had to.
Yeah. I have noticed a lot of my folks on my projects, this has freaked them out, like especially my colleagues in the motion picture industry. They've basically like shut down all of their community meetings all week as they're like figuring out how they can work from home. Because a lot of those people like work like disconnected from the internet on big rendering farms and stuff.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so that's less than trivial. Unless you got to set up like Sean there in the background, then it looks like you're probably set.
Yeah, those are 2012 era Mac Pros running Ubuntu and just basically backing up databases and running a few very lightweight algorithms. But cheaper than buying hardware and serving it at a server farm.
Yes. And you're putting hardware to good use. You're keeping it out of a landfill.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. Do we want to actually do that last agenda item first? Review the comments that we have on the metric? Seems like that might be easy and something we can do fairly quickly.
It isn't easy because there's only one comment.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I looked at the issues and PRs earlier. Yeah, I don't know if the comment is really anything we need to address in the metrics definition. Because it's really a question about what types of data you could gather. And I think that's...
Yeah, I mean, that gets pretty nuanced too, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, I think a review is I mean, I don't know. A review is not a code contribution. It's a different. I mean, I don't know.
An activity.
But yeah, it is a contribution, but it's not writing code.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, that's kind of that's part of the purpose of the metric that we released. So it's types of contributions, and it's the metric that's sort of designed to make sure that you aren't leaving out the contributors who do things other than, commits.
Yeah. So code review can fit under coding. It can fit under quality assurance and testing, security-related activities. You can probably find a few others where it also fits in. And the fact that this commenter, I don't actually know.
Not someone I recognized.
The fact that Umut asked, hey, does this include this? Shows that this metric, how we wrote it, is effective at getting people's gears working.
Getting people thinking about things, for sure.
Everything has a consequence, right?
Okay, so I'm just going to add in the notes that no updates needed yet. Okay. And then the other thing we had, so we have the next two agenda items are kind of the same thing. So the spreadsheet that we have is really just the release spreadsheet. So if you go to the Common tab, you can see some of the ones that we've sort of been considering or we've started. Looks like types of contributions. We can move that to...
Are we looking at the spreadsheet right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess we can move that to ready.
What is it, ready?
I think that's what we put it when they were going through the review process. And then the others, yeah, we can move to released.
All right.
I don't think that there was a, yeah. So we have a couple, time to close and lines and files. There were two that we were thinking about doing. Did we make any progress on the time to close metric? Were those the response metrics that Janny was working on at one point?
I'm not sure. Do we have an issue for that?
That's what I was just looking. Responsiveness metrics.
Yeah, issue 13.
Yeah, time to first response and time to close. I'm gonna copy those into the spreadsheet so we don't lose them. I'm gonna
The time to
Add.
post response, yeah, we already took care of that.
Oh, that one's already done?
Well, that's released, I believe. And time to close.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, there it is. It's right there.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, time to close. That's the one in here. Put the link to the Google Doc in.
Perfect. Do we want to, let's go ahead and look at that one and see how much progress we've made on it. Some progress. We've got the question and the description.
We can probably shorten that and move some of it to objectives.
Yeah, agreed. Do we want to just work on this now in the call? Or does somebody want to take the action to do it later? Anybody have a preference? Do you guys want to work on it now?
I'm always happy to have a working session, but I don't want to prevent anyone from going off and doing awesome work themselves.
Okay, so we'll work on this as a working session, but we'll do that last. First, I think maybe what we want to do is identify a couple more metrics that people could start working on so that we have kind of a pipeline, I guess. I don't remember what lines and files were. Garrick, do you remember what that was? I think they were based on, there was a Grimoire Labs schema that we were looking at that had metrics that were implemented but not defined.
So this one is, yes, we looked at it, and for commits, Grimoire Lab can go down into the commits and see how many lines were added, removed, changed, and how many files were touched. And that was not documented anywhere. So the way that I see this is types of contributions is a parent, and then underneath that, for each of the items in our long list, we can have a separate metric that defines what that data is, where to get it, how to calculate it, and neutral, value neutral. So unlike diversity inclusion, where we have the D&I angle, or the evolution, where we're trying to understand how the project evolves, here in Common, we can just say, here's the plumbing on how to get the metric. And lines and files is like the child of commit. So types of contributions as the parent, then commits as one of the types of contributions, and lines and files as a piece of information or submetric of that. That's how I see it.
Okay. Since you have a better idea of what that is, do you want to probably after the meeting create a couple of issues with kind of a description and maybe a couple of documents that are just sort of stubbed out for those metrics? Is that all right? Do you have time to do that? I don't want to sign you up for stuff, but
I can open a couple issues. That's easy enough.
okay.
With Google Docs, so if we go back to the types of contributions metric that we have, I'll get there, just one second. If we look at this, here, I'll put in the chat so we all know what I'm talking about. So in the types of contributions, we have under implementation, the following list can help with identifying contribution types. So for each of these contribution types, we could create a metric. Is that the route we want to go?
seems like overly metrophizing, if that's a word.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the the problem I have with that approach is that we're going kind of these are going to be a lot of these are going to be really qualitative and sort of uh difficult to define because it's going to be different for each project. You know what I mean? Like I feel like we already have the data collection strategies are kind of there. And I don't know that we need to go into a bunch of detail in each of the individual contribution types.
Hmm.
You see what I mean? Like how would you measure troubleshooting and support?
Well, that's
Aside
exactly
from,
why we would have to write that metric and talk
yeah,
about
but
it.
I mean, you measure it with like an interview or a survey, right? Which is in the data collection strategies.
Then what that metric, if we defined it separately, and I'm not saying we should, I'm just thinking out loud here,
Yeah.
then we would actually provide the interview questions or the survey questions that you can use.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. What do other people think?
I mean, I've kind of said what I think, right? So if I say it again, I'm redundant.
I think
I
it's
I
not really helpful either. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I had this idea, but I don't like it.
yeah, I think that there are metrics that we should spend time on before it's not that we should never dive into this, but I think that we should probably spend time in other places first. Sort of my thinking. Um, I'm curious, Sean. Oh, sorry, going back to this, but I do think we probably should define the lines and files because I do think that is a
Yeah,
metric that is
yeah, for sure, for
relatively
sure.
important.
Always
Um,
used.
yeah, Sean, my question for you, are there one or two things that you can think of from Augur that are implemented in Augur that we should probably have better defined in the common working group?
In the probably language distribution. You know, we have pretty good information about how much of each language is actually used in a particular project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that would be something I think is a common working group issue. We're looking at code complexity and risk, and that's more of a algorithmic measure. Size of commit, I think, is, and size of pull request. I don't know if those are common or evolution, but we certainly see some patterns there.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
I
look
think
at
size of commit and size of PR I think would be good for common. And then I think evolution would probably create metrics on top of that to talk about what they like interpreting them and what they mean from an evolutionary standpoint.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. That's exactly. That's why I phrased them that way because they're general enough
Mm-hmm.
that yeah, they can be, I don't know, subclass for lack of a better term.
But before we dive into like size of commit, um, can we maybe have a metric that says commit? And I know we already have that in evolution.
We do.
Um, and then, but maybe we can bring that over to common so that we have types of contributions. A commit is a type of contribution. And then for the commit, we can look at lines and files. We can look at size. and we're starting to build the tree of specificity. Now, the concern I have is splitting all that out into different metrics, or whether we stop at commits and make lines and files and size as different filters or different.
Like pull requests have number of commits in them. That's a right. So pull request ends up being like a grouping together of commits. And I'm not sure if I see lines and files and size of commit. I mean, I suppose you could measure them, and they're easy to measure in the Git log as on a commit by commit basis. But I think I'm more interested in those as sort of aggregated metrics, and I don't know. Because I actually think lines and files are filters on commit. I'd have to go back and look. So when I think of size of commit and size of pull request, I'm really thinking about like almost like a mean size, which people ask about a lot. like people are seldom interested in a discrete commit size. They're interested in like, you know, what size and how many lines of code, what languages. I have no idea what Georg's icon is, but it's very interesting. So just notice that.
Okay.
So I added language distribution here as well, as something we can look at within commits. I still think we need to define it separately though.
Yeah, language distribution I was thinking of actually as that's something we can measure at the whole project level. Like if I look across what the current state of any project is, and that number doesn't shift, the distribution doesn't shift wildly over time. So if I measure the lines of code in each language or the number of files in each language at a point in time, those are very slowly moving pie chart relationships, I guess you'd call them.
Something you just said, Sean, made me think. What do you mean by size of commit again?
Well, by size of, I mean, so I get a little confused when I say distribution of language, but size of commit is the number of lines added, number of lines removed, number of files added, number of files changed. You know, there's a couple of different ways to evaluate it. Size of commit is it's number of files and number of lines added, removed, and white space is how I think about it. And number of files is a factor as well, because the more files that are in a commit, the more complex in general that commit is. And I would say that I see like pull requests with lots of files changed and commits with lots of files changed often take longer to review.
So I'm proposing to merge this with lines and files because that sounds identical.
Yeah, I mean,
the question is, do we call it size of commit or do we call it lines and files? I think both of them try to figure out how many lines were added with files added.
Well, and I think Sean's earlier point was that maybe the metric is commits, and at least I think that was Sean's earlier point, was that the metric might be commits or commit, but lines and files and things like that would be filters, sub-elements of that metric.
Yeah, and right, and I think people are not interested in discrete commit data. They're interested. I mean, the aggregations across, like over a month of commits, what's the average number of lines added, removed, white space, number of files touched, and so it gives you a sense of how the project is working or who is how different people are working on a project.
Okay, that's awesome.
I have to open my window a little more. When I close the door, it gets hot in here.
And you said the commits metric has already been implemented or partially implemented within
Pretty sure Evolution did
Evolution?
that early on. Let me check the spreadsheet. They call it, I guess it changed to code changes. So it used to be called commits, and now it's code changes and code changes lines.
Okay. Okay. So it looks like we have three separate metrics or groups of metrics that we can start working on next. One is language distribution, commits, or code changes, lines, and pull requests. Does anybody want to pick up one of those and create an issue and create a doc for it and get started on it?
For pull requests?
For any of them, language distribution, commits, or pull requests.
I can do pull requests. There is a, so in Evolution, this is just a, they're calling a pull request. This is so. So it's called a review.
Because it's
But
called
now,
different in different projects on different platforms. Pull request is just the name that GitHub gave it.
but now there's also some pull requests open, pull requests closed. So there's a little linguistic inconsistency in Evolution. I'm just gonna make a comment in Evolution about that.
Hey everyone, this is Sean. Sorry, I had microphone issues at first, so just wanted to say hi, I'm sitting in, but one comment on the pull request part is are we paying attention to Garrett-based workflows, and in that case, it is just a review. That may be a reason not to call it pull request, or to at least be aware that there's some differences in how that works.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Yeah, for not calling them reviews, for not calling pull requests reviews.
Or for not titling this pull requests, because pull request is a very GitHub specific name.
Right. So the Evolution group had called them reviews, and I just think personnel Evolution over there lost sight of that. So I made a comment on all of the pull request ones that they're considering that they'd be called reviews. And so we would call in common, what would,
Yeah, all the pull request ones are in Evolution are just stubs from back when we started the CHAOSS project. I think we can almost get rid of them and just clean up, because we have taken that and created the review ones. There may be one or two that are still like pull request comments. I don't think we have an equivalent review comments or review commentary or anything like that. So that might be one where we actually need.
I think those are actually new ones that have been developed because they have Google Docs associated with them.
Are you looking in the issue?
I'm looking in the Evolution working group.
Under metrics, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're 17 months old, all the pull request files.
No, but I'm looking in the spreadsheet.
Oh. You're looking in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, so the spreadsheet created these in December 2019. So that's pretty recent. So they're just templates. We should throw a question to the Evolution group.
Do you wanna take that back to the evolution group?
Yeah, I'm just gonna
Okay.
put another comment in here and says,
My concern is how we are going to abstract from what evolution has done, not duplicate. Maybe it's
so what is it that common? What are we proposing to do for common with pull requests?
I mean, my thinking was that that's one of those metrics that's going to be common across all of the working groups.
Mm-hmm.
So we should make sure that it's properly defined. And if it's already been defined in one of the other
Review.
working groups, then maybe we just point to that and be done with it. Maybe we
Reviews.
don't need to define more.
So what's been defined are reviews accepted, reviews declined, and reviews duration, which are not actually defining a review,
Hmm.
right? So the actual definition of a review of a pull request, whatever. I Oh no, there no. I'm sorry. I take that back. Reviews. Although I don't know what this. There is a reviews metric released. I'm going to look and see what it is. Yeah, it looks kind of like a pull request. Yeah, the evolution group has defined and released a reviews metric, which
Do we think it encompasses all the things that we need from that metric? Because if it does, then maybe we're done. Maybe we don't need to spend time on this.
I can't. I mean, so it's very by itself. I don't think it defines all of the things, that we're interested in about reviews. But it defines
Okay.
what a pull request or review is, and they have, I guess I'd call them companion metrics for reviews accepted, declined, and duration. Um, I don't have an opinion about whether it's covered everything because I was part of creating it, so I don't have a clear view.
Well, suggestions on how we want to move forward with this. Is this something that we should spend some time on to figure out if we have it covered? I mean, maybe Sean, maybe you aren't the right person to do that if you feel like you've already.
Yeah, I definitely would be biased towards, yeah, we did this, so I think it's gonna need somebody with a outside view of it to
I
see if
have the
there's something
same
missing.
bias.
Does
I
they?
I agree that evolution already has done a pretty good job at defining this. So
Um,
we can point to it, or we can ask evolution if they want to pass it over to common.
I'm. I guess I'm sort of the mind that if it's already been defined in one of the working groups, I wouldn't worry too much about moving it around or. I mean, if both you and Sean feel like this is pretty much done, let's spend our time in other places, and we can always come back to it. Um,
Yep, that's where my mind is at.
okay,
Yeah,
I'm gonna add that to the notes then.
yeah,
What about?
I might raise a question in the community call just about like this is a good example of it being it's a common thing, and we're maybe at some point when we start the librarianship part of maintaining these, this is one of the ones that might move.
Okay. So what about the other ones? Does anybody want to tackle language distribution within a project?
I can tackle that one.
Okay. How about commits? again, evolution has some of this already. I think this is another one where we need to figure out whether or not we really have enough there. I can take this one.
The one thing that evolution does not currently have is this idea of files. So
Okay.
it defines code changes as basically a commit, but neutral. And they have the code changes lines, so they don't have code changes files.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Okay, cool. So this gives us a couple of things to work on next. Do we want to spend, we have about 20 minutes left in the call. Do we want to spend the rest of it as a working session on the time to close metric?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
You're not looking at time to close, right?
Yeah, time to close. Sorry, I was just
Yeah.
adding a task list so I wouldn't remember to look at the commits.
And I
while was-
created a Google Doc for language distribution so that I would have a placeholder for that.
Cool. And if you want to throw that in an issue so that we can find it later, that's been our biggest problem. is
Okay, I put
finding-
it in the spreadsheet, but I can also put it in the
Okay.
issue.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so time to close. What do people think about the question? Let's start with that.
I like it. It's very neutral. It doesn't specify whether it's an issue or pull request or Git code review, whatever, or email.
Mm-hmm.
Although emails you can't close them.
I
I would say it's when an
grammatic-
event.
Go ahead.
I mean, well, this might be too precise, but I would say how much time passes between an event being opened and requiring attention. Blah blah. I don't know. I guess there are some kinds of events that occur and require attention, but don't ever enter a closed state. So, implicit in the time to close is that there must be an open state for an event. So my comment on an issue may require attention, but it won't be closed ever. So it's a type of event that's like issues and pull requests are the two I can think of that have both open and closed states.
Should this be time to resolution or time to close? Like, do we want to be specific to basically kind of pull requests and issues, which are things that are closed?
Time to response is kind of what I think that question's asking.
Yeah. Well, okay, wait a minute.
I don't know.
Wait a minute, because sorry, we have time to close and we have time to first response.
Right.
So we have time to first response is already defined as a metric.
Okay.
So maybe we need to be careful about how we do this one. Because
Maybe
it's
you could just keep the definition and it's implicit in the name of it that it has to be closed. Say it again, Georg and Don,
I
sorry.
think it's okay to have it implicit that you cannot have a metric about closing something that never could be opened or closed.
Okay. So I think I've messed up the sentence. Should it be something more like this? How much time passes between an event being created and requiring attention? No, I've screwed this up. English bad at this point.
It's already late where you are. It's okay.
I'm gonna back up. No, it's not timed response. It's time. Sorry, wow, my brain is done at this point. Okay, how much time passes between an event when an event requiring attention is created and is finally closed? Like finally created.
I don't know if you need requirement.
Okay. Between when an event is created and, yeah, get rid of that. Okay.
Do we want to call it an event?
What else would you call it instead? Activity or? I feel like
Yeah,
events are something you close. Like an activity is something that could be ongoing without ever closing.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't actually know. If we talk about ticket, it's already too specific.
Yeah. I think event is good.
Yeah. Maybe we can describe in description what an event is.
So let's have a look at description.
So here we call it creation event. That's an interesting take. We have the creation event, we have the closing event, but it doesn't say on what. So maybe we want to change that and say we are looking at the creation of an event.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna accept all of the.
Yeah, do it. We've made it so that I can't even read it now to see what we're trying to do.
The time to close,
Yeah.
total amount of time that passed between the creation and closing of the event. I don't think we need the next sentence.
I would just get rid of it. Did you just cross it out or did you?
I only crossed it out.
Okay.
Because it's annoying to switch between edit modes.
It is, yes. It is.
Crossing just is one key command. And now whoever's highlighting this blocking my view on writing.
Sorry. That was probably me. I was just going to delete it.
Yeah, go ahead. Where I rewrote
Yeah, I
it.
like that better.
And I think the way it's worded, it's not exclusively these three. So we're open. Um, so this reads very much like Daniel. He is explaining what this is. Maybe this goes to objectives, this next paragraph.
I don't think those are objectives. I think those are implementation details.
Then I will move it to implementation.
Is this the right template?
Yes.
Okay, but example should be, I'm looking at examples and known instances because that doesn't,
No, it
no,
goes.
those aren't references. I think those are those, I can't remember what the headings are supposed to be for the examples, and are they known instances or are they, I forget what we're calling that. That doesn't look right to me.
Let me pull that up.
Oh, here, we can just look at one of the other ones. So under implementation, we have filters and visualizations and tools. Filters, visualizations, and tools providing metric. So I think those probably belong somewhere under those. Is data collection strategies one of our typical headings?
It's an optional one.
It's an optional one, okay. Because I was just looking, time to first response doesn't have it.
Yep. All of the ones inside implementation are optional.
Okay. Cool.
So I'm looking at the template that I also shared in the chat again.
Okay. Cool.
I just added optional for the time being. You can always remove it later.
Totally. Sounds good. We only have a couple of minutes left. Do we want to start on one of the other sections, or do we want to pick this back up next time?
I need a few minutes between my meetings.
I do too, because I have another one right at the top of the hour.
So I would be happy to say toodles.
Okay. I will add this to the agenda for next week.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
all.
See you in 2 weeks.
See you
Bye-bye.
in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.